are back with comedian David Boyle, and I'm quitting alcohol. So in the next 12 to 18 months, fortunes are going to be made. This is the period to take advantage of. The fucking head of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, came out today and basically said they'll be cutting interest rates soon, which is fucking insane. They're booming. Lowest unemployment ever. The markets are up, real estate's up, everything's booming. And he's like, we're going to cut rates. So there's about to be a massive injection of liquidity. By liquidity, I mean fucking just money. Money is liquidity. They're about to create probably the biggest bubble they've ever created since the last bubble. The last bubble hasn't even burst. I wish I knew what I know now fucking like 10 years ago. I'd be a multi-millionaire by now. It's not even fucking hard to figure out. In a debt-based society, the only thing they can do to prevent a collapse is issue more debt. Infinitely. Forever. That's the only thing they can do. They said they were tightening by lowering interest rates earlier in the year and last year, but they didn't really, because the Treasury, this is in the US, the government continued spending at a rate that has never been seen before. $1 trillion every 100 days. So it doesn't really matter if you fucking cut rates when the government's still spending. It's called fiscal dominance. Fiscal policy, which is the policy coming from the government, overrides monetary policy, which is the policy that's coming from the central banks. Basically, the interest rate. The interest rate that's coming from the central banks, whether they're tightening, which is increasing interest rates, or easing, quantitative easing, which is lowering interest rates. It's so fucking simple. And when you know the only thing they can do is increase the debt, which is pushing liquidity, money into the system, which is lowering interest rates, so there's going to be a fucking wave of money coming into the economy. This money has to go somewhere, and it goes into assets. It goes into the stock market, it goes into property prices, gold, commodities, treasury bonds, crypto, fucking anything. Anything you can get the money into, because you can't keep the cash, because when they continue issuing debt, the cash becomes worthless. So the only way to protect your savings is to get into an asset, an appreciating asset. And over time, that can be anything. The stock market, you take the S&P index, which is like basically the top 500 companies in the US. And the S&P 500 is basically tracked asset inflation forever. But doing that, you're not really earning money, you're just protecting your money. Unless your asset is appreciating around 10% a year forever, you aren't even beating inflation. The good thing about inflation, there's no good thing about inflation, but the governments of the world, they're really inflating the currency, and inflation is running at about between 7 to 10, maybe 12% every year. But the governments can't say that. So they say like 4 or 7, whatever the fuck they want to say. It was 9, I think, at the start of 2022 or 3. So if you have debt, your debt is actually becoming cheaper and cheaper to pay off, even if they say inflation is like 9%. So it's such a Frankenstein fucking monster of an economy now that there's not really much more room to move. But over the next 12 to 18 months, you're going to have an opportunity to absolutely fucking rake it in if you are smart about it. And then I reckon there's probably going to be some sort of crash let's say, how about we say around about 3 to 6 months after the US election. Let's call it that. So you want to fucking get in and get out pretty quickly. But where do you get out to? You know where I would get out to. I've been talking about it for fucking 3 years. But it looks like everything's going to rip over the next at least 6 months to a year. It's going to be looking pretty good. I think you can expect some rate cuts in the next few months and then a few more after that. So yeah, 12 months is looking pretty good. Those Bitcoin miners that I mentioned last week or the week before, they absolutely fucking ripped today. Iris Energy, up 25%. Cypher was up 10%, but it's up like 50% in the last bit over a week. None of this is financial advice, by the way. I'm a comedian. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, but these Bitcoin miners, they also double as artificial intelligence centers. Well, the good ones do, which are Cypher and Iris Energy. And these data centers are going to be some of the only places that have enough power, that generate enough compute power to run a lot of the AI that's about to come on the market. AI takes a lot of power to run, and it seems like the only places that are set up to handle that type of compute power are the well-run Bitcoin mining data centers. So I can see big things in the future for some of these Bitcoin miners. But remember, this is not financial advice. I honestly have no fucking idea. If you want to listen to someone who has some idea, it's a guy on Twitter. His name's Mike Alfred. He's like the industry leading expert on Bitcoin mining, and fucking his accuracy with just about everything is insane. So if you're interested in anything I'm saying here, then I would go check that guy out and see what he has to say. Go back through his tweets. Go back through all his tweets and see how accurate he's been over like the last, let's say, 2 years. You're probably not going to go through all of them because he does about 10 a day, but you'll see. Anyway, fucking let the games begin. That'll do for today, and I'll see you the fuck later.